What's up guys, Cody here with PCF. We specialize in decks, railing, patio covers, and electrical. Today we'll be going over the circular saw, as you see here, kind of the anatomy of the circular saw, how to use it, any safety recommendations that we have, and kind of what brand we recommend and what brand our carpenters are using out in the field. Today we'll be having Zolen, one of our lead carpenters with Timberline patio covers, come in. He's gonna kind of do all the demonstration and go through everything with you guys. And then if you're looking for any of the products that we recommend here today, you can find those in the links down below.
Hey guys, I'm Zolen with Timberline patio covers. Today we're gonna be going over the circular saw, also known as the skill saw. So let's jump right into anatomy. So obviously we've got two grips on here. We've got your forward grip and then your main rear grip with your trigger on it. We've got our blade housing, our blade guard down here below that kind of protects fingers or workspace. So if the saw is still spinning, you set it down, it doesn't eat into your workspace. We've got the base or foot, the motor housing. This is the part that's got all the electronics in it. Back here, this little button is your blade stop. That's how you're gonna lock the blade in place in order to change the blade. We can go over that in a little more detail later. Some saws are gonna have this rafter hook, so it's kind of a 3-position deal, but that allows you to hook the saw onto things, generally a rafter or joist if you're building decks, roofs, whatever. We've also got our blade depth and angle adjustments. So back here, we've got our depth adjustment. So some saws will have actual inch marks on here, like 1/2 inch, 1 inch, so on and so forth. This one, a lot of the skill saw models will have marks like 1/4, 1/2, 3/4 plywood, and then 2x lumber. So essentially it just changes how much of the blade sticks out so you can control the depth of your cut. So we also have our blade angle adjustment here. So this allows you to change the angle of your cut. So you've got 0 degrees or technically a 90-degree cut. Most of these saws will lean over to 45 plus. A lot of them will go to like 52 or 53 degrees. A lot of models will have a stop at 45 degrees or 22.5, like the more commonly used angles. We have our fill port. A lot of these use gear oil, so you can unscrew this and pour gear oil into there. And then most saws will have a tool slid, at least most of the skill saws, will have a tool slid into this slot right here in the foot. You can pull that out and use it to change the blade, but unfortunately this one is missing. All right, so now we're gonna jump into safety. Just so you guys see, the saw is unplugged. We wanna make sure that I don't accidentally actuate it and chop a finger off. 3 of the most important pieces of safety gear: ear protection, eye protection, some sort of glasses, actual safety glasses, goggles. You know, I have prescription glasses that protect me pretty well. And then gloves. Not everybody likes working in gloves. I've gotten used to it over the years. I think it helps you work faster and safer, so I really like gloves. Some things about safety with the skill saw. Obviously, the blade is the part that's gonna bite you. You know, you wanna keep that away from body parts. You do not want to, you know, when you're cutting, you don't want to be cutting above a leg or anything like that. One of the things that can happen with a skill saw is, especially the corded models, the battery-powered models are usually pretty good about having anti-kickback brakes and whatnot. But the corded models can actually kick back if they bind up in a cut. So whenever you're cutting, just make sure you don't have any body parts directly behind the saw. You don't want to cut like right next to your piece of wood because it can definitely bounce back and bite you. The biggest thing though with skill saws is pinning the guard back. Our company actually has a policy that if you get caught doing this, you are terminated on the spot, because it is just such a dangerous thing, and we've had guys, you know, seriously injure themselves doing this. So this pencil's actually not going to work with it, but you'll see a lot of guys stick their pencil into the blade guard to hold the guard back. The guard's there for a reason. You know, most injuries with skill saws occur because either the guard was not functioning or somebody had pinned it back. So don't pin the guard back. Not only can you hurt yourself by doing that, but you can also, you know, if you have it pinned back and you set it down while the blade's still spinning, it can run across the ground and destroy stuff. So beyond the guard, you just want to keep all kinds of stuff out of this area. So this is actually a perfect example. I had a key go into my blade one time. So having dangling items or clothing, anything that can fall into the blade and get sucked in is a really bad idea. Okay, so now we're gonna go over how to use a skill saw. Really just basic stuff. We're not gonna get into any advanced techniques or anything, just kind of simple cross cuts. So obviously you've got your trigger here. That's how you're gonna turn the saw on. A lot of saws, especially the battery powered saws, are going to have some sort of safety device, usually something you have to actuate with your thumb. So you will hit it with your thumb and then pull the trigger. So I'm going to mark out a simple 90-degree cross cut, and then we will go over all of the things I'm going to do to make this a nice cut. So one of the first things to realize is that skill saws cut on the upstroke. You can see that just based on the direction of the teeth. When this thing spins, it spins up like that. So as it comes up, it cuts. So what that means, the reason that's important is you generally want to cut your piece of wood from the back side. That way your teeth are going into the pretty side first, and that's going to leave you with a much cleaner cut. And we can demonstrate that with this cut here in just a second. We're going to mark this with pencil so we know which side is which, because that piece is going to fall out. So we're going to line up our saw right here with our pencil mark. Right now I have the blade touching the piece of wood, but I'm not going to start the saw that way. I'm also going to look up here at my notch. Most of these saws are going to have some sort of notch. I'm going to make sure that that is pointed on my line. I want to make sure I'm not kicked off to the side or something like that. That's going to require me to have to straighten the saw as I cut. Okay, so let me put my ear protection in and we're going to make this cut. So again, I'm going to touch my blade to the piece of wood right there where I want to cut. I will check the notch up front, make sure I'm aligned, and then I'm going to back the saw up just 1/4 of an inch or so and start the blade. You don't want to start the blade while it's touching the wood. All right, so once I started the blade, I just slowly push through, making sure to track my line and keep it nice and straight. So we can look at this piece. Going back to what I was saying earlier, this edge, this was the top side of the cut. You'll notice that it's all frayed like this. It's all fuzzy, whereas the bottom side of the piece is a really nice clean cut. And that's why with a skill saw you want to cut from the back side, is that way your top side will have a nice clean cut and you won't get any of that fraying. Okay, so we're going to go over changing the blade now. So most saws are going to come with a tool to change the blade. This one is built in right here. It's a little Allen key. Depending on the saw, they usually come with some sort of little flat wrench or something like that. Most circular saws are going to have some sort of locking mechanism. What that's for is locking the blade in place so that you can actually get some torque on this fastener. If the blade wasn't locked, it just spins and you can't really get the bolt undone. So they've got this lock right here. Basically, you just press down on it, turn your blade, and eventually you'll feel it fall into the lock, and then it's good and secured. One thing to realize is a lot of these skill saws, especially the ones where the blade is on the left side, are going to have reverse threaded screws. So you can see on this one, hopefully, that it actually says loosen this way, which is normally the way you would tighten a screw, but this one is actually reverse threaded. So it's going to feel kind of weird, but you are actually going to turn to the right to loosen it. Once you get it popped loose, then you don't need the lock anymore. You can just turn that screw out. You will likely also have some sort of washer that clamps the blade in place. And then you can just slide the blade straight off. Be aware that a lot of these saws will have some sort of washer on the back as well. Just make sure that doesn't fall off. If it does, your blade's going to be right up against your guard and damage will occur. So make sure that goes back on. So as you're putting your blade back on, you want to make sure that you've turned it the right way. Obviously, there's 2 different ways you could put it on. Only one will work. You want the teeth facing up in front. Because remember, as this saw cuts, it's going to spin this way, and the teeth are gonna cut on the upstroke. So we wanna make sure that's the way our teeth are oriented. So blade on, we're gonna put our washer back on, and now we're gonna start tightening our screw. Again, reverse threaded, so it's lefty tighty. Once we get it snug, now we will engage our blade lock and finish it off. You don't need to go crazy on this. Save your gorilla strength for something else. Just get it snug. Because it's reverse threaded, it will actually self-tighten to some degree. All right, and there we go. Our blade is changed, our battery's back on, we're ready to use. Okay, so we're gonna get into some demonstrations. Basically, you're gonna have four main cuts with a skill saw. And again, this is like your mainstay of a job site. This is like the most versatile saw I use. We use it for almost everything on the job site, but your four main types are going to be just a straight 90-degree cut. So, you know, something like that, just a straight cut, which we'll do here in a second. I'm just gonna go ahead and lay these out. Then an angled cut, so like a 45-degree angle is what we're gonna do right here. Then we've also got a beveled cut, which is where we will actually lay the saw over at an angle and get an angle that direction. And then a rip cut, which is going down the board long ways. So let's start with these first two cross cuts. Before we do that though, one thing that a lot of new carpenters will do is cutting between your supports. So you can see that my wood is supported on both sides here. If you try to cut right here in the middle, as you finish the cut, the board's gonna start to bow down and pinch your blade. That can lead to the saw kicking back at you, or you're splitting your wood out. So make sure that you're always cutting over here on the outside of your supports. That way your cutoff piece can just fall away cleanly and you end up with a nicer cut and you're safer. All right, let's make our first cut. So there we go, there's a nice straight cut. You'll notice that I kept my hand about a foot away from the saw. I kept my body back away from the saw. Just make sure you're keeping away from that blade. So our next cut is going to be this 45-degree cut, and we're gonna line it up. And one thing that I'm gonna do on this cut is I'm actually gonna just slightly hold the guard back with my thumb. That's okay, that's not like pinning the guard back, because since I'm holding it, if I let go, it pops back and acts just like normal. So. All right, so I'll show you guys that cut. So that's what a 45-degree cut looks like. And of course you can make any angle you'd like with this. But there's 45-degree cut. All right, so our next cut is going to be a beveled cut. So we will also do a 45-degree for this one. So what we're gonna do is open our blade angle adjuster. We're gonna lay the saw over to 45 degrees, tighten that back down. I'm gonna make sure my depth is set all the way down, and we are going to make this cut. All right, and that is what a bevel cut looks like. So one thing that I was doing there that you may have noticed is I was actually looking up here while I was making my cut. So skill saws, there's generally two ways that people are going to use them while they're making their cut. Either they're going to look over here to the left at the blade, or right, depending on which direction the saw is oriented. Or you can actually look up here. The foot will have a couple of notches. Generally, most saws will have a notch for 0 degrees and a notch for 45. So that 45 notches when you have it laid over at a bevel cut. So those little notches are very, very helpful for tracking your cut and making sure that you have it lined up properly. All right, so our last cut that we're going to do is a rip cut. So say we have a pressure treated 2x8 here. Let's say you need a 2x4. You don't have the material on site. It's a lot easier to just make your own instead of going to the store and spending a bunch of money sitting in traffic. So I'm going to mark this out, and I'm going to put a couple of scrap boards underneath my piece so that I don't cut into my sawhorses when I make this cut. Another thing we can do is use our depth adjustment. So I'm going to move this down to 1.5 inches. This saw actually cuts slightly shallower than it says, so I'm going to set it a little bit deeper. And that way, as I'm making the cut, we don't go all the way through. Another way guys like to do this adjustment is they will just set the saw on their workpiece and then move it up until the bottom of the blade is just barely through the work, and then lock it down. All right, so there's our 2x4 that we milled down with that rip cut. That's what it looks like. That kind of wraps up our 4 different types of cuts with the skill saw. Of course, there's a million other things you can actually do with them. You're not locked into just those specific 4 cuts, but those are by far and away the most common cuts. All right, so now we're gonna talk about different types of skill saws. So I'm gonna show you 4 different types of skill saws and what each one is for, what they're best at. So we're gonna start over here with this little DeWalt 20-volt saw. This has a 6.5 inch blade. This is a great, inexpensive saw. They're like $100 or so, and all the major brands make something like this. The 6.5 inch saws are great for cutting through 3/4 inch or 1x material, finished material. They're lightweight, they're easy to maneuver, they don't fatigue your arm, but they're not really gonna have the power to get through a lot of 2x material, especially pressure treated. It really kind of bogs down on that. It will make the cut, but it's gonna struggle. So great saw for 70% of the stuff you're gonna do, but when you wanna cut through something that's pressure treated or 2x material, that's when you wanna step up to one of the 7.25 saws. So we've got 2 of them out here. First, we're gonna talk about this one. This is DeWalt's 60-volt battery-powered saw. Just basically, this is kind of a copy of the next one we're going to talk about, which is the ubiquitous skill saw worm drive saw. So all the major brands have started making something like this with the blade on the left-hand side, with the rafter hook. Again, it is essentially a copy of the next one. So this guy is the saw that you'll see on pretty much every job site. This saw is seriously why we call circular saws skill saws. Skill saw is actually a brand, it's not a type of saw, but so many people use skill saws that we actually call circular saws skill saws nowadays. This is a worm drive saw, which essentially means the motor is on this axis and it has a little gearbox down here that then transfers the power over to the blade. It gives you more torque, it gives you kind of a better profile for the saw, and it puts the blade on the left-hand side, which a lot of people really like. You also have your rafter hook. That's great for framers. You can just hook it on a rafter. You don't have to like lower it back down. Just makes it super handy. It's a little bit heavier. It's definitely a lot heavier than the little battery powered saw. And of course you're gonna be stuck to a cord, but it's a great saw. They're not crazy expensive. It's something that the average framer or carpenter can definitely afford. One thing to be aware of if you're going to buy one of these saws, they make 2 different models. So this is the standard model. It's got a standard stamped steel foot on it. They also make a magnesium model that has magnesium foot. That is the one that most people get. It's, I think, like 2 pounds lighter or something like that, which definitely makes a difference. So if you're looking at the skill saws, the magnesium one is a good way to go. And then we've got 10.25 inch beam saw. So we use these a lot because we cut a lot of 5.5 inch beams. This is really nice because it has a much greater depth of cut, so you can get through 4x material in 1 cut or 6x in 2 cuts. So this is something that the average guy is not gonna need, but if you're doing a lot of framing and are gonna be cutting through 4x or 6x material, just know that it's out there. They actually make a bigger one even with a 16-inch blade, so it is an option. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about my personal recommendations. I am a DeWalt guy. These are my two personal saws. The reason I like DeWalt, it's just because that's the brand I bought, to be honest with you. However, that being said, I wouldn't change now. I've used Makita, I've used Milwaukee. All of our guys, or a lot of our guys, have different brand tools. So we, being out in the field with different crews, I get to use kind of everything. And this saw right here, this 60 volt, is really the reason that I would not change from DeWalt. This saw is so amazing. It's my baby. It's my favorite tool I have, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's actually, I think, the DCS 577, but this saw has just as much power as the corded saws because it uses their bigger 60 volt batteries. It's super powerful. This one is like 4 years old now, or 3.5 years old. So we're up here in the Pacific Northwest where stuff gets rained on. This thing is just taking it all. So as you can see, it's beat up and it just keeps going. It's been a great saw. To me, the three main brands that most people use, again, Makita, Milwaukee, DeWalt. As long as you go with one of those three brands, you're gonna get a quality tool, you're gonna be happy. It is worth stepping up to one of those three, big name brands, and you get a quality product that's gonna last. So those are my recommendations. Go with DeWalt or Makita or Milwaukee.
All right, so that wraps up the video today. I want to thank Zolen for coming out and showing us how to use all these saws, kind of giving us his recommendations. So we did a survey with all of our carpenters. We have about 20 crews here at PCF, just to go over and kind of figure out which brands they use in the field. All the saws that you see here and all the saws that are going to be in the survey, if you wanted to go with a different brand, those will all be linked below. We do get a small commission off of it if you do buy through the link, but it goes to making more videos like this for you guys. And also, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so now. And thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you again shortly.